Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Saturday edition of Let's Talk with me, Julie Alli. On the show today, we're going to be talking about a book entitled From Marabastat to Mogadishu. The author is Hassan Ibrahim, and he's going to tell us exactly what motivated him to write the book. That's a little later on in the show. We're going to be looking at the national health insurance. Government and politicians have been threatening, possibly promising us that this is definitely going to happen sometime soon. Is it workable? I'm a cynic, I don't think so. But let's hear what the experts have to say about NHI. But right now, a beautiful, sad, heartbreaking, but a human story that's going to give you hope. It's that time of year, and I've noticed that a lot of the people that I have met thus far have been complaining for some reason or the other that it's been a tough year. It may be related to economics, it may relate to broken relationships, it may be related to not finding the dream job, or whatever the issue is. But several people have been saying that 2019 has been a tough year. So why am I saying this to you? Well, simply because when you hear our first guest story, you'll probably change your mind from being negative about your situation and start being in gratitude for the abundance in your life, being in gratitude for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and knowing that Allah will not give you a burden greater than you can bear. My guest is Lutfia Ismail Saluji, and she's here to talk about her story. I heard her speak at a women's only function a little while ago, and I felt that her story needed to be truly spread as widely as possible. So definitely we can start counting our blessings. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum assalam.
We were together at a function. You gave a talk there. It was a women's only function. And there were probably 600-700 people at the function. But I just felt that your story needed to be told as widely as possible, simply because of what I've said in my introduction. We forget to count our blessings. We become a nation of moaners. I mean, currently as we sit here, we know that we're having a huge issue with rolling blackouts. And what do? We complain, instead of looking at the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, Lutfia, you're sitting here in a studio with me with a moon boot on your foot. And of course, your story goes way, way, way back. Let's start with the moon boot. Why are you here with a moon boot in studio?
Okay, so I'm a diabetic now for 32 years. I developed neuropathy on my feet. So I've lost sensation. So
Complete sensation?
Yes. So if I walk, I sometimes do not feel how hard I'm walking. So I broke my foot. Surgery was done on this foot, and it was a success.
How long ago?
That was last year, November.
So was it the first time you realized that
the foot was broken?
Yeah.
So no, so actually the foot was broken 2 months before my husband passed away. And it went into a moon boot and it healed. And then he passed away and I moved to Johannesburg. Everything looked fine. And the same foot then started giving me problems again.
But you didn't have any sensation in the foot. How did you know that there's a problem?
So a blister occurred under my foot.
Okay.
And I didn't feel that as well. Until you actually look at your feet, you can see what's going on.
Right.
And then I was put to bed rest for 4 months. So I couldn't walk at all for 4 months before the surgery because it needed to heal. Then surgery took place in November last year, and it was a success. And I was in a cast for 3 months and unable to walk. So total non-weight bearing at all. So I had a wheelchair and started walking in February this year. in a moon boot.
How do you function, given that you've been obviously not able to walk and be active at all? How are you able to get through all of these months? And I also know that you have two children, a teenager and an 11-year-old, am I right?
12-year-old,
12-year-old. And of course they need support, and things need to happen in and around your home.
So alhamdulillah, I'm very strong-minded and I have a lot of support.
Alhamdulillah.
So my in-laws, my family, my friends, I've really got a very strong support structure. That's half my battle won already. My dad lives with me, so he does the rounds with the car rounds at the age of 76.
Okay.
And he's been a blessing in my life as well. But mainly I've been through so much in my life.
And I'm going to get you to uncover all of that. I just want to focus a little bit on your diabetes and your healing, and just how important it is that people with this condition be vigilant.
Definitely. I've been through so much that now I actually take every test as it comes, and my mission now is, if I conquer the test, I've made Allah happy with me. If I complain and I don't accomplish it, then I've been a failure. So I've got this mindset that yes, I am allowed to feel sad and sorry for myself sometimes.
And be angry.
But I know Allah is doing it and protecting me from something worse.
Alhamdulillah. We are insan. We have weak moments. We allow our nafs to take over our thoughts, our actions, etc. What is it that kind of brings you back, when you are in a very dark space in your life and you have reason to be in that space a lot?
Definitely, yes.
What pulls you back? And how do you kind of keep, being positive?
So I've got a few ayats that I recite daily that I have total yaqeen in. And my children. So these children have been through so much in their life, because from the time they were born, I had diabetes. But if you look at them, they also haven't gone downhill. They are positive children, embracing the world, and that makes me a better person. But my Quranic ayats that I read, and I read a lot of Quran that keeps me focused, and I read a lot of Islamic literature, which helps me realize that even the prophets were tested.
Absolutely.
They were tested even more than we are tested, and they were so dear to Allah.
Absolutely.
So who are we? Our tests, complain. We have no reason to complain.
Just as a matter of interest, what are the Quranic ayahs that you read on a daily basis to give you that strength to get through the day?
So I read a lot of Astaghfirullah.
Yes.
And then I read one ayah, it's Allahumma ajirni fi musibati wa akhlif li khayran minha. It's, oh Allah, what you have taken for me, grant me better.
Alhamdulillah.
And that I read continuously, every salah, and I make a lot of dhikr of Allah.
Okay. You're in this space now. What are the doctors saying to you going forward about your diabetes and the healing of your foot? Because you're still pretty young.
Yes.
I hope not. I make dua that you don't have future injuries, but there is that possibility that you could have future injuries. So what is that outlook, that prognosis?
So,
what's it like?
alhamdulillah, my diabetes at the moment, it's like I'm not a diabetic, because the control is exceptionally well. This was caused maybe from a prior when I wasn't so well controlled, but sometimes in life, I don't know if all diabetics feel that way, you just don't give yourself enough time to take care of yourself. And you let it, you think you're okay, but you're actually not. And now that my HbA1c and everything's so well controlled, I've already got some of the complications. But alhamdulillah, it hasn't attacked my heart, it hasn't attacked my kidneys, my eyesight's perfect. The only problem I do have is the neuropathy.
Okay.
So going forward, my issue with, I can't run ever again. So that's...
And you were a runner.
I wasn't a runner, but I was a very sporty person.
And your husband was very sporty.
My
he introduced you to sport, did he not?
Yes.
Okay, so you won't ever be able to run?
I won't be able to run. I can walk. The doctor has told me. I can do a lot of aqua aerobics and stuff like that, but not high impact. So no treadmill and that. So, and I would have to wear now special inner soles in my shoe because if we get back to what happened to my foot, so I started walking in February this year. And then in June, a day after my husband's 2 years of passing away, I found out the leg is broken again.
How did you find that out?
So my leg was swelling, and I called a physio through because I thought maybe it's from the previous op. And when she looked at my foot, she said, something's wrong here. But actually, it was a bug that got into the bone from an open wound. So it must have been the previous surgery, which then disintegrated the talus.
Goodness me.
So then again, I needed to go for a second op where they had to remove the talus and now bolt my whole leg together. So I've got a titanium pole till halfway my calf.
What about pain and discomfort? Is it bearable?
So I've got the neuropathy where you feel no pain.
Oh, yes, of course you did say.
So I don't feel pain, so that's half my problem. So I can carry on.
Regardless.
Yeah. So even with my first op, I did the Muddy Princess with a broken foot.
Okay.
I did the whole thing. So.
All right, let's go for an ad break. When we come back, you're going to tell us the rest of your story.
Okay.
Lutfia Ismail Saluji is in studio talking about all of the challenges she's been faced with. And the reason we're sharing the story with you is I was so inspired when I attended a high tea where she gave a talk that I felt this was a story that needed to be shared with the rest of the nation. We'll also be talking NHI and a book called Marabastat to Mogadishu. Welcome back. We are talking to Lutfia Ismail Saluji. She's here to share her story with us and for us to rethink our situations. We're very, very quick to bemoan our situations and think that we're carrying the entire world's load on our shoulders. But I think when you hear these type of human stories, you kind of rethink the status quo. It makes you start putting things into perspective in your own life and to be in a state of eternal gratitude. You are in your mid-30s, you married at the age of 20, and of course, like all young girls marrying for the first time or at that stage of their lives, they have big dreams, hopes and aspirations of living happily ever after. Your story didn't end that way. Your story had a very abrupt break. Tell us about it.
So I wouldn't say it didn't end that way. I would say we lived
very happily
ever after.
When your husband was alive.
So my husband was always well. He never suffered from any illness. So I was married to him for 16 and a half years. Not one day did he go to a doctor.
Sure.
But 2 years ago in Ramadan, he got very sick. He got the flu, and we just rushed him to hospital, and within 4 days, he was gone.
So why did you rush him to hospital? You're saying he just had the flu?
He was battling to breathe.
Okay.
So, and he became very thin. And after the 27th night, he was very stubborn, so he wanted to go to the masjid, and he came back. And his heart was beating very fast and he was unable. And I said, no, I'm taking you to the hospital. And we took him the next morning and he was still fine. We admitted him for pneumonia. And I left to give the children iftar and they phoned me to say, no, he's been rushed to the heart clinic. And from there, 2 days after, he was gone.
How did that change your life?
Changed everything. I mean, he was my support structure. He was my everything. He gave me the best life I could ever ask for. Allah really blessed me with him. But we had to then relocate from Durban.
So 16 and a half years of utter love and bliss. Yes. And in a wink of an eye, everything changes for you.
Everything was changed. Everything. And he was like no other man, I can say, because his whole life was his family. It was me and my kids and his family, my family. Life was just about being with your family and being together. And when he was taken away, it was like I had to now rethink the whole situation. But Allah has made me so strong, and I think I learned so much from him that I'm coping quite well. And Allah blessed me with such a good family. Talking about my husband's family, my family as well, everyone is there to help me pick up the pieces. There's never a moment when I can say there isn't someone there that can help me.
What else, what other challenges have you had and how did you manage to cope? And I know, alhamdulillah, you keep talking about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is what, and an amazing support structure from your family, both sides of the family. But you still do have your moments of weakness. What pulls you through? How is it that we need to, what is it that we do and say to ourselves to keep that iman so firm and say, Allah, just continue giving me sabr?
So I know everyone always says, look at people less fortunate, count your blessings. And that is what gets me through. But mainly it's that every time you conquer something that you think you're unable to do, you just feel, Ya Allah, I did it. Like, you sometimes think, you know what, there's going to be no way you're going to do this.
There's no tomorrow.
No tomorrow. But Allah gives you that strength. And just it's your total yaqeen in Allah, saying that, you know what, you put your trust in Allah and whatever follows through will be. Sometimes we worry so much. And at the end of the day, what you want is not going to happen. It's what Allah wants for you. So if you have that and you have that mindset, nothing can hold you back.
You said to me off air just now that you've had challenges from the age of 8. And here you are almost 30 odd years later talking about your yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your faith. You are so firm in your faith that nothing can faze you. What were those challenges? And at that tender age of 8, how were you able to kind of navigate through life's journey of tests?
So at the age of 8, I was diagnosed with diabetes. And every year since that year, I've been in hospital, either for a week or 2 weeks. We actually joke about it and say it's my weekly, like my yearly holiday or whatever in hospital. At the age of...
How were you diagnosed at the age of 8?
So
what is it that your parents picked up?
No, so also a wound on my foot that didn't heal. And I was sleeping a lot. When my cousins came home, I was a child that was always active. And they just noticed that I was so lethargic. And 5 uncles are doctors. So my one uncle came and picked it up that I'm a diabetic and rushed me to hospital. Alhamdulillah, at that time, Johannesburg Gen was very
amazing.
Good. The facilities were amazing and I got the best treatment.
Right.
And we took it from there. But then at the age of... Then I had like small complications going through life. But at the age of 17, I lost my ability to walk.
Completely?
Completely. I was admitted into hospital, but everything was clear. So the doctors actually told my parents, pack her up, take her home. There's no hope. We don't know what's wrong with her.
You just couldn't walk?
I just couldn't walk and I lost a lot of weight. I was 39 Ks and it was just bad. I remember our helper helping me to go to the bathroom and back. And with that, I started recovering. And then my sister, who was absolutely well again, a 24-year-old, she passed away. And
How?
In a car accident. And the day she passed away, Allah gave me my strength and my health back because my mom and dad were devastated. They were absolutely gutted. They couldn't do anything. And when that happened, I started being their strength.
So you needed to take over.
I needed to take over. And all of a sudden, my health picked up again. I was walking again, started working again, back to normal. I was sent to pack my sister's home up because my mom wasn't strong enough. So that was one Mayat house I did. And a year later, I met my husband. And the first question we asked him was, look, she's diabetic. some men don't want to marry women that are sick. And he said, Allah will look after and I'll look after her.
Alhamdulillah. With diabetics, there's also the issue around falling pregnant and starting a family. And I'm so glad you're here to talk about your condition, because a couple of weeks ago we had someone coming to talk about diabetes and obesity, a doctor.
Yes.
And I think with you following up with this interview just emphasizes how we take diabetes for granted. And how our lifestyles and our diets can impact the wellness of our lives going forward.
Definitely. Diabetes is not like people will say, oh, she's diabetic. It's just one of those illnesses again.
If you say cancer, everyone rallies around you. But when you say diabetes, oh, well, so.
What they don't realize is diabetes slowly attacks every organ in your body. And if you're not well controlled, it gets there quicker than what it will eventually take its turn to get there. But if you're well controlled, you can live a totally normal, good life.
You're at a point where 2 years ago you lost your husband. You are diabetic. You have these continuous breaks in your legs. How hopeful are you about your future? And we know Allah is the best of planners.
Definitely.
But when we talk about this, we all plan.
Yes.
About your future in terms of your health and well-being.
Alhamdulillah, I'm very positive, because if you don't know me, you'll never know I have diabetes. I mean, even at the moment when I walk around, if my leg is covered, no one even knows I have the moon button. I'm a very positive person. I do everything. At the moment, I can't drive. That's my only downfall, and I'm hoping to drive soon.
And you're employed as well. I mean, you work a full...
half a day.
Oh, half a day.
But since I've been ill for this 6 months, because I work for my in-laws, I've taken a break because I needed that rest. This time I needed like 5 pints of blood because I lost a lot of blood and I was weaker than normal. But like there isn't a day, if my son says, Mommy, fresh rotis, the fresh rotis are there.
Okay, we're going to be wrapping up, believe it or not, in a minute or two.
Yes.
In terms of the future outlook of your life and also the importance of donating blood, because you've just received 5 pints of blood. What do you want to say to our viewers about it?
So please donate blood, because it takes a long time to get that blood. I had to wait almost a day and a half to get blood to me. I would advise everyone to donate as much blood as you can. You never know when you need it. And also the outlook in life is never give up hope.
Absolutely. Were you concerned when you started a family knowing that you're a diabetic?
Not really. We wanted children, and it took me 3 years to fall pregnant without any contraceptive. And when the day we found out, it was like the happiest day of our life.
It was an amanah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Amanah from Allah. And if I didn't have my children today, I don't think I would also be as strong as I am.
Absolutely. They almost give you purpose and a will to live. What do you want to say to our viewers with everything you've been in life, being diagnosed as a diabetic from the age of 8, meeting your dream man at the age of 20, marrying him, having 2 beautiful children with him, and then him passing on 16 and a half years after your marriage, and your continuous health issues? With all of that, you're still very positive, you're bubbly, you're beautiful, and you have a very can-do attitude. We know it's through the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's your yaqeen, it's your sabr. But what do you tell people? Where do you find that strength?
So I would say you must challenge yourself. Any challenge you are given, challenge yourself that you can make it better for yourself.
And
don't
it's
be
the power
negative.
of positive thinking, am I
right? It's mind over matter.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Jazakallah for sharing your story with us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue blessing you with good health and be the amazing superwoman that you are. You are such an inspiration to the whole world out there, and you blew me away at the high tea. So please go on touching lives in a positive way. Go on telling people how beautiful and precious life is, and if you think positive, you can move mountains.
Ameen. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah for being with us. The amazing Lutfia Ismail Saluji sharing her story with us. And I sincerely hope that if you're in a dark space right now, just reflect on her story and just think of how positive this woman is against all the odds and draw inspiration from there and place your trust and sabr in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Welcome back, and I think perhaps the next interview might be a bit contentious. I may or may not agree with my guest on this issue, and it's the NHI. I definitely am a skeptic, but let's see if she can change my mind. Her name is Nelisiwe Msomi. She's a journalist and engagement officer at Health E News. She's here to talk about that very sore point in most of our lives, and that is the National Health Insurance. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam, shukran for having me.
My pleasure entirely. Now, we might have a bit of a bun fight on the show this morning. Up to now, what I've heard about NHI doesn't speak to me. It actually frightens me. And when I make a comparison with NHI and the National Health Insurance in the UK, it frightens me even more. But before we go there, and your interest in this issue is, who is Nelisiwe and what exactly does she do at Health E News?
So I'm a journalist at Health E News. I do a lot of research work, and I'm also an engagement officer. So I do
Meaning?
Everybody always wants to know what this means. So we do a lot of engagement work with in terms of running social media campaigns, and also running one of our campaigns called Izwilami, which we run for gender-based violence. And it's a please call me service system where we get, if you have been raped or have been sexually harassed and you need help, you send a please call me to one of our numbers, and it tells you where's your nearest Tutuzela Care Center, or where you can get help, so you can get your medical help, legal help, and the third, your counseling. Yeah.
We've just come out of the 16 days of activism of no violence against women and children, so I can't miss up on this opportunity to throw this at you. What is it that we're doing wrong in South Africa? I've had men on the show talking about abuse against women and children, and they keep saying role modeling, role modeling, role modeling. But I believe that perhaps something more needs to be done, very especially with our black men, our black fathers, our black brothers, our black sons. Maybe I'm wrong in making such a generalization, but we are living in a patriarchal society. As a woman, as a journalist, as someone involved in, obviously, Health E News, what have you come up with, and what do you believe needs to be done differently for men to sit up and realize that we are their equals and they need to respect us? And they don't beat up. If they don't feel good about themselves, they don't go out and beat up on a defenseless, fragile woman.
And I think that's the thing that we are missing is the roots of it. So what's making them beat up women? We and it's okay that we focus on women being the victims of it, but we need to go back at the cause of it. This is what men are facing. It's a systematic thing of white supremacy. It's a systematic thing of not having the presence of fathers around.
How does white supremacy play into gender violence? Is it about the exposure to outright racism and feeling so demeaned as a man, and that has been passed on in our DNA from generation to generation, that our black men are carrying this with them, and the only way they know how to release all of this is to beat up on women. So they're perpetrating the same atrocities that were perpetrated on their fathers and grandfathers. We need to break the cycle.
It's exactly that. And I think also how the white supremacy is systematically set up. White supremacy is set up in a way that it takes away men from their homes. And you're
talking migrant laborers.
Migrant laborers, right? That means kids grow up without their fathers. Then they start having issues of not having two parents in the house, because the family unit is important. And they're misguided, and they get involved in the wrong things. And there's violence. There's a violent pushback, because we're such a violent society. We are socialized into violence. We are socialized even through media about being violent. We make violence okay.
People may argue, white people, not necessarily supremacist, but white people watching us and listening to us talking this morning, and perhaps feeling that, hey guys, get over yourselves. We're 25 years into our democracy. Why are you blaming the apartheid system for the ills of today, for the angry men in our society, the way men beat up on their women? It ain't our fault. It's your own issues that you're having to deal with.
I don't think it's even like a racial issue also, because white women are also being beaten
Absolutely.
up and killed too. So it's not to say it's an exclusively black men thing. But I think that saying that, we should get over it and saying kumbaya, it's not really the time, because inequality, we're the most unequal society in the world. And you cannot say we should get over it when you are living day in, day out through that inequality, and that inequality is perpetuating violence.
Again, people might argue and say, all right, 25 years into the democracy, you're talking inequality, but it's the government, the corrupt government, that has brought us to this point of inequality. If government was straight, if they'd done the right things, if the country was managed in the right way without being captured, there would have been employment opportunities and education opportunities for the entire country. So why are you blaming other forces other than where fingers should be pointed?
So the country has been, it's been 25 years, right? There has been corruption. We cannot deny that. And that's and it's brought us to this dark place. But let's go back. We've had apartheid since 1948, which created unequal systems. We've had slavery for 300 years on top of that. These are unequal systems. You can't expect them to be broken in 25 years and say, I cannot blame your great-grandfather. Yes, I'm going to blame your great-grandfather. You're still benefiting from what your great-grandfather did. So I think, one, white people should acknowledge their privilege, and there are white people who acknowledge it, and they do the work of saying that my grandfather did this. This is my contribution to rectifying that, and saying that I want to do the work. I want to see you have the same opportunities as me, And that's just it. I cannot be a child from Alexandra, for example, and have the same opportunities as a child down the road in Senton. And then I must blame it on the current government. Alexandra has been existing way before that. So yes, our government has corruption issues, but we can't just think that democracy is going to erase everything. It's a process.
How does all that then tie in, everything that I've raised with you in the past while, how does that tie in with gender-based violence?
I think everything just ties in with gender-based because it's systematic, right? Black women are the lowest in the system if you look at the pyramid, we're right at the bottom. And everybody else is oppressing us, right? We're the least paid, systematically, and if you are right at the bottom, it's easier to kick you, for everybody to kick you. So right
when
above us is black men, and they don't know who else to take their frustrations out of, but on us. And above them is like white women, and then it's white men, and white men take out their frustrations on white women on black men, white men, black men. So like there's all of this pressure, and then us as black women, we have to sort of like take it in and find a way to push back. And right now we're at the point where we say it's enough. We've watched our grandmothers go through this, we've watched our mothers go through this, and we're not going to go through this, and we are breaking the cycle.
It's fine to say those words, it's fine to articulate that we're going to break the silence, but it's the how. How do we break the cycle of violence? Because obviously black men, or men in general, don't seem to embrace the idea of counseling because they think it's only sissies that go for counseling, and yet a lot of healing gets done in those spaces.
And I think it speaks to how we socialize as people, right? And really going back to this idea of decolonization, right? So what defines a man and what makes a man? And I'd always bring it back to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who was never afraid to show emotion.
Absolutely.
And that did not make him less of a man.
True.
And that's what we need men to do, to understand that if you cry and if you show emotion, that doesn't make you less of a being. It doesn't take away your strength. It doesn't take away from your masculinity. And we need initiatives where boys are raised in that way, where if a boy cries, he should be allowed to cry, and sayings like boys should not cry, or even sayings like boys will be boys when they do something wrong, and you don't reprimand them as a parent because they are a boy. Gender should not determine whether something is right or wrong. Right to wrong is a human thing.
Okay, let's go for an ad break. And very definitely we're going to talk NHI when we come back. And Nelisiwe has articulated it so beautifully by suggesting that our beloved Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was not afraid to show emotion. He was not afraid to be soft. He was not afraid to cry, because this indicated the softness, the big-heartedness, and the humaneness of the most powerful, the most generous, the most wonderful man who walked this earth. Still to come on the show, we'll continue with Nelisiwe, and we're going to talk NHI. We're talking NHI with Nelisiwe Msomi. She is an engagement officer. She's also a journalist, and she's with Health News. And let's hear what are her thoughts on NHI. I've owned up to the fact that I am a big skeptic as far as this is concerned. Let's get the other side of the spectrum and see if there is hope after all. NHI. Politicians are banging on about it. We heard and hear that for it to start up, billions of rands is going to have to be invested to get this system working. We also hear that the National Health Insurance Fund in the UK is facing all sorts of problems, and I think that was introduced way back in the year 1932. They are a first world country, haven't yet mastered it completely, or are at a point where they just cannot afford to sustain it. What makes us as South Africans think that we can ace this, knowing the history we come from and the background of corruption?
The NHI is not perfect, right? But so is our current health system. Our current health system was designed in apartheid, right? So the NHI is basically a fund, where it's a singular fund where everybody is going to access their health care. So what we are currently experiencing in our healthcare system is an unequal access to health. Even in private healthcare, and if you have a medical aid, right now, by May latest, you have run out of funds. And then that makes you a public health care user, right? So like 80% of the country is users of public health. And private healthcare is becoming increasingly unaffordable, even people with medical aids. So
what is going to happen to all of these amazing private clinics, the Life and Netcare, etc., and other smaller private healthcare clinics with the most amazing of facilities? And I've also been told that South Africa has very highly qualified, specialized healthcare professionals. What's going to happen to all of them? And added to that, we also hear that a lot of these very specialized healthcare professionals, like nephrologists, like gynecologists, etc., 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 are all leaving the country because they're afraid of what NHI is going to do? Is it going to cut their bottom line? So a whole host of questions there for you.
Yeah, so basically what's going to happen to private care facilities is that they will be working hand in hand, government will be buying services from them, right? So you'll be a registered NHI user, and you can, where you are placed is the hospital that you can use once you're referred to. So within the NHI, the basis of it is primary health care. So you only go to hospital once you're referred there. So what we need to do is like strengthen our primary health care.
So currently we've got clinics that services primary health care, and then only if the need arises do you get referred to a state hospital.
To a state or private hospital, depending on where you are located, right? And I mean, we've had, just a few months ago when the NHI fund was launched, we've had Life Care saying that it's a friend of the NHI because they have been doing universal health care coverage in other countries. So they have that experience, so they are on board with the NHI and they support it. So not everybody in the private healthcare is anti-NHI.
All right, so what about, we know that 30% of the country is unemployed. Another marginal percentage, maybe 10 or 20%, are possibly earning a minimum wage. And the balance then obviously makes up the total of the population. So people like you and I who pay premium medical aid to have good coverage, what happens to me? Do I still continue paying that premium rate? And what about my helper who earns a minimum basic wage? Is she and I both going to access the same type of healthcare services where she doesn't contribute to healthcare and I do?
Exactly that. That's what the point of the NHI, to bridge to bridge the inequality gaps in accessing healthcare. You know, so for me,
so I'm not going to get preference at all. Is that what you're saying? Even though I pay premium rates to have medical cover, I still continue paying my rates?
So you won't be paying. So what will happen is that the Medical Aid Act will be amended, so there won't be medical aids existing for your normal healthcare. So even GPs will be registered as NHI GPs. You know, so government will be paying that. So there will be NHI will be funded through tax. So essentially, medical aids are just going to exist for what they say is, it's like cover that you don't necessarily need.
Gap cover.
Not really gap cover, but like maybe if you need plastic surgery, for example. Along those lines, it's not necessarily so. It's not necessarily so. If you have something like cancer, and you live in Soweto, you will be able to access cover. You will be able to access facilities like your Netcare and stuff like that to get oncology and so forth. So you're basically bridging the gap so more people can access good quality healthcare. But it's also upgrading public healthcare facilities so that they can be at the standard of private healthcare.
So what happens to all of these healthcare professional specialists who are in private practice? They don't charge, I'm on medical aid, so some of them that I engage with do not charge medical aid rates. They charge 3 or 10 times more than medical aid rates. Obviously, they're making big bucks out of this current system. And once NHI has been introduced fully, they're not going to make that kind of money. Are they then the doctors we're talking about that are migrating because they're not making, big sums of money by charging 10 or 20 times medical aid rates?
I think the notion that doctors are leaving is just fear-mongering, right? I've went to NHI public hearings that have happened like the past few weekends throughout in many provinces of the country, and we've had doctor organizations like the South African Medical Association, which is a trade union of doctors, coming forward and saying we support the NHI. We've had doctors coming to us and saying that, we are hoping that the NHI can come in so I can serve patients and not worry about those who say, doctor, I'm sick, but I don't have money to pay you.
Okay. let's summarize now what we've talked. Let's talk about facts and myths around NHI. If you can just summarize that very quickly, or give us a couple of points around myths and facts, a few points on either one or both.
I think a myth is that the NHI is, I don't know, that the NHI won't work. Nobody knows if it will work or not, right? We know that the current health system is not working. So why do we want to keep it? That's the question that I have, is that why are we just want to hold on.
What about loopholes as far as corruption is concerned?
So corruption is there, but and it will always be there. I mean, we are humans, and where there are humans, corruption dates far back. I mean, Fir'aun was corrupt, But what has happened recently is that the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has launched an NHI corruption watch. So this has like the NPA, your SIU, your Hawks, your civil societies like Outer. They're going to be watching the NHI fund and how it's being spent.
Okay, let me ask this question just for clarity. Mm-hmm. Currently, I'm on a medical aid, a very good medical aid for that matter. When NHI is introduced, does that fall away? Are you saying I don't have to make a contribution? It's going to go out of a special tax fund. Mm-hmm. The playing field is going to be equalized. And we all, you and I and my helper, my domestic helper, will all be able to access the same type of service. But surely that tax base is not going to be big enough to cover the entire country. There's going to have to be some sort of funding from somewhere else as well. Mm. I want to know, where's that funding coming from? Are they going to continue asking people like myself to perhaps pay some portion towards the running of NHI? So
that's a big question in everybody's mind. Like, where are we going to get the money from? In his midterm budget, Tito Mboweni, the finance minister, said when we implement the NHI, which will be fully implemented in 2026, it will cost the country 66 billion a year. So how are we going to fund it? And I think there will be taxing the rich for the poor, and I think it's...
But not through a medical aid scheme?
I think like your tax credits from your medical aid will be used to be funded towards the NHI fund. So there will be taxes. It's, the rich paying for the poor, which is a socialist way of approach of healthcare. So people will be taxed.
The rich, obviously, or the middle class. What about people who wanting added cover? Will there be room for that?
I think that we will fully know once the Medical Aids Act is amended to make way for the NHI. So right now we are looking, I think it's at the stage where it's being amended, and once the amendments come out, we'll know.
We have a huge problem with illegal immigrants in the country, never mind the legal ones. But currently we're hearing people saying that they are straining all of our systems, education, healthcare, housing, etc., etc. And of course, healthcare is the big one. Mm-hmm. How do we respond to that?
I think
illegal immigrants.
I think that's one of the myths about healthcare system, that we have so many illegal immigrants straining our system. It's a complete myth. I mean, they've made various articles that have been written by civil society organizations like Section 27 who work with illegal migrants, and how they are not actually overburdening the system. Yes, they use our healthcare services, but we also have laws around the type of healthcare that they can access. And a lot of the time, like with asylum seekers, it's always emergency healthcare. So I think it's a myth for us to, and it's a xenophobic myth for us to perpetuate and say that they are overburdening our healthcare system.
That's all we have time for. I think we need to get, obviously, the Human Rights Council to come in and talk further on this issue and dispel the myths even further. I'm still not convinced, but I think we have to have that many more discussions around NHI till I'm convinced, or till we can see it in practice and bearing the results we're hoping it will. But thank you indeed for your thoughts. You have some amazing ideas about NHI and a whole host of other issues. So it's lovely to pick young minds like you. So thank you indeed for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And there you have it, Nelisiwe Msomi. She's a journalist and she's also with Health EK, talking about her thoughts on NHI and also gender-based violence. Still to come, we'll be talking to an activist. He's written a book, From Marabastat to Mogadishu. Let's hear what this is all about. And the final interview looks at the life of an ANC soldier, the journey of an ANC soldier. He has written a book called From Marabastat to Mogadishu. He is Hassan Ibrahim. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You got involved in the ANC and activism, not necessarily the ANC, but activism in your university years.
Yes.
Who or what was that single crossroad that, you know, you came to and you realized that you need to be active to make a difference and to take this country to freedom?
I think it was the death of Solomon Mashlangu. When they were arrested, and the circumstances in terms of when they were arrested in 1977, and then Solomon Mashlangu was finally executed, was what made me decide that this was it. I could not stand on the sidelines any longer. I needed to participate and play an active role.
And you still continue your studies in law?
No, I didn't start law.
You didn't start at that point?
No. The original intention, like many young men of my age, we were hoped to become doctors. So we all struggled to get into BSc and then finally become doctors. But that was not meant for me because I became an activist. Yes.
But of course, at the time as well, there was the quota system. There still is. And that must have been very difficult for you to, a bitter pill for you to swallow, because your dreams were taken away from you. Extremely
so. I mean, when we were in class at University of Westville, we were about 400, of which only about 10 or 15 were going to get into medical school. Besides that, the quota system was a bitter pill, yes. So at that point, you just felt the harshness of the system, the apartheid system, and that just kind of almost added to your activism, pushed you into the activism space. Bear in mind, I did not intend to go to Westville. I was forced to go to Westville because of my father. I felt that I would not attend the Bush College. I, in fact, wanted to go to, leave the country and go to study. But my father insisted, well, he couldn't afford to have me go outside the country. And Westville was the only university open to us. And so I was forced to go to Westville. So it was a bit of an uncomfortable thing for me personally at that point in time, because politically I felt it was untenable. Absolutely. But I went to Westville anyway. The types of challenges and the types of really issues that you encountered as a young activist obviously molded you and pushed you further and further into the area of politics and activism, obviously. And finally, that many years later, you've written the book, which we'll talk about in a little while. But things that stand out for you, and were you ever afraid of, being caught, being locked up, detention, possibly torture, and all of that? Let me highlight a couple of points. One is that when I got to university, I'd already been, shaped and molded politically by the community at large because of our social conscience and religion and so on, and by my father and his views on justice. So when I went to Westville University, I was already inclined politically. But when I went to Westville University, it was in 1976, and June 76 uprisings it just threw me off on a tangent. I got involved and felt that I needed to be active. I left Westville in 76 and went to Wits in 77. Learned a lot on political studies and so on, because I started my law degree there. And then decided I needed to get active after I experienced what happened to Solomon Mahlangu. I felt I needed to get involved. I left the country to find the ANC, because I couldn't find the ANC in the country.
Why not?
There was no evidence. I mean, it was totally underground, and there were very few members of the ANC actually present.
Had they all left the country?
Most of them had, and were not active.
Okay.
So the underground structures were not, you could not see them. They were hardly present.
Okay.
So I left the country, went to Botswana, got recruited, and came back and started being active. That was I was not activist as we currently have with civil society and so on. So we didn't have that. Aside from student politics, there was nothing else that you could get involved in. So I got involved straight into the underground, started my underground structures about 78.
What stands out in your mind with all of your underground activities? And when you look back in retrospect, is there anything that makes you really cringe and think, oh goodness me, did I really expose myself, my family, my comrades, etc.? That was a very, very hairy situation.
Well, there were many of those. Before I left the country, one of the things I did was I recruited a young white man who was involved in the South African Defence Force. As it turned out, he was also responsible for the communications network, which meant that I was now privy to almost all the secrets of the South African Defence Force.
How could you trust him? He could have been a double spy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was quite a difficult thing, especially being as immature as I was, young, very immature in these matters of security and so on. But nevertheless, it worked in my favor.
Wow.
It was about a treasure of information. I was able to channel that back to the ANC with great value. But he got arrested.
Oh.
The moment he got arrested, my life was then threatened, in the sense that I didn't know how soon they would come to me. And if I was arrested, then the people I recruited would also be affected. So I then had to leave the country to protect the interests of everybody else.
And also your family would have been continuously harassed.
Well, they weren't known. At that point in time, there was no attention directed towards me.
But if there was...
Yes, it would have been disastrous.
Were you ever worried about that?
Oh, incredibly so. And as it turns out, when I went to Botswana, my parents were harassed, whenever they came to see me, and they were taunted, and they had very unsavory calls and visits.
Whilst you were involved in all your activism, did you ever think, because way back in the day, I never ever thought that we'd be able to throw off the shackles of apartheid. It was like unimaginable. This is the only life we knew.
Correct.
Did you ever think that this would happen, and now we almost 25 years and beyond into a democracy, never mind the bit of a mess that we are in at the moment, but the fact of the matter is, we're not governed by apartheid laws.
Absolutely. I think, as young activists, we were driven by hope, and hope is what carried us through. Ironically, whenever my father visited me, he would always ask me, when are you coming home? And I would always assure him in quite an arrogant manner that, no, we're going to be home. And we were sure of it. But of course, we were never quite sure of it. It was always a terrible mountain to climb. It was a very steep thing to overcome. So it was difficult 10 years from 1980 to 1990 that we experienced. Very difficult for the family and myself, psychologically. I mean, the question of the challenges. One never believed one would be where we are sitting today.
Absolutely. The murder of Ahmed Timol.
Yeah.
How did that shape you further, or what was going through your mind at the time when that happened? And no doubt you knew that he was murdered by the apartheid regime, so to speak.
I think that was sort of common knowledge and accepted. It was part of, I was very young then, not politically active and not even
yet.
clear, not yet. But it was certainly
But it had
traumatic.
an impact on your life.
Yeah, there's no question. There's no question. Ahmed Timol's murder had a major impact on all of us. We were young students, and I remember very soon after that, when we were in school at Republic's Day, they had some gifts, and we trashed all of that and so on.
And refused to hold up the flags,
Absolutely.
etc.
We didn't quite understand it fully. We didn't comprehend the import and the impact of it all, but yes, it had an impact.
You've written this book, From Marabastat to Mogadishu. Who should read the book, and why the title? Obviously, you were born and brought up in Marabastat, but why Mogadishu?
Well, if you look at my life's journey, my initial upbringing shaped my consciousness and my political thoughts, both in the community and from my parents, my father in particular. Got involved in as I said, from University of Durban, Westville, but immediately thereafter, when I got involved in the ANC, it didn't take long before I went into exile. And the 10 years in exile was in the underground leadership, where I managed both political and military activities. But when I came out of exile, I was party to the rebuilding of the ANC structures, but then drawn in very quickly into the negotiations process. So the next 5 years until 97, from 92 to 97, I was involved in the negotiation of both the interim constitution and then the final constitution. 97, I got involved I was recruited into the Department of Justice to implement the constitution. So I spent 10 years implementing the constitution. But after my stint in the public sector, I then started doing work internationally. And internationally, I worked in a number of countries, Libya, Yemen, Zimbabwe, but a large part of that was Somalia. And over the last 10 years, I've spent my time in Mogadishu, and I'm still there, and in fact, tomorrow I return to Mogadishu.
Okay, we'll talk about what exactly you've been doing in those countries, and also, obviously, your work in helping draw up the Constitution. My guest is Hassan Ibrahim. He's written this amazing book, From Marabastat to Mogadishu, The Journey of an ANC Soldier. And these are the people, Hassan is one of those people who are not in the forefront of politics as we know it. He worked underground, so when his name surfaces, people kind of ask and wonder, who is he? How active was he? How responsible was he in the reshaping of South Africa? So he's here to tell his story, and these are the unsung heroes of our struggle. Hassan Ibrahim is my guest. He's written a book called From Marabastat to Mogadishu. He obviously was an underground activist back in the day of the dark days of apartheid. You were, like I said, one of the unsung heroes. Are you know, when you reflect and make a comparison of your days of activism and the current youth of this generation, what are you worried about? What worries you?
Well, at a personal level, especially from a point of view of my dean, I get concerned that we often separate politics from religion. And people see religion quite separately from politics. And I believe that to be an error. I think our religious perspective should guide us in our involvement in the community, socially, economically, and politically. I'm pleased that our young people they are born freeze. They've never experienced what we have experienced, and they have no understanding of what it is and what we had to
But
deal
will
with.
they have the depth of character that people like you have because they were not exposed to any struggle in their lives?
Depth of character is shaped by the community and the society, and that's our responsibility. And part of this book is imparting some of that knowledge and experience to our future generations. That is our hope. I mean, the purpose of storytelling and writing up our history is so that younger people can know.
Absolutely.
And inshallah, this is what will be carried through.
You've traveled and you say you're based in Mogadishu. What exactly is it that you're doing there?
I do two things in Mogadishu. I basically I work for the United Nations in two particular areas. The one is help Parliament and help build government. So I specifically help Parliament and have been working with Parliament continuously since 2012. But I've also been responsible for helping and supporting their constitution-making exercise.
Because you were involved with that in South Africa.
Correct. That is my expertise, and that's an expertise I've been practicing internationally. So I've
and well sought after.
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. But I've been involved in a number of countries and very privileged to engage with the leadership of different countries and help find solutions to their problems.
You worked hard in the struggle. You worked hard. You put your life on the line for us to enjoy freedom in this day and age. Your thoughts on the current state of affairs in South Africa, very especially around state capture, nepotism, corruption, etc.
Yes.
What do you believe needs to be done by Ramaphosa and future leaders of the country to turn that cycle around? Because we're very disillusioned.
Yes. I think it's quite understandable that people get to be disillusioned. There's a number of crises and challenges that people are facing on a daily basis, rolling blackouts and the inequality in this country, the high unemployment rates, this disillusionment amongst a number of young people who fear for their own future and so on, the state of the economy. So yes, there's a lot to worry about. Our country is a new democracy. It's a new democracy and it's facing all sorts of challenges both nationally and internationally. I think we're going through a dark period, but I've been exposed internationally to different countries and experiences, both in developing and developed countries. I still have an extreme amount of hope. I'm confident that South African spirit and the willingness to achieve and succeed is greater than the problems that we experience. Now, you cannot underplay the problems that we have. They are enormous. But I'm confident that as South Africans, we have the ability to overcome that. Not only overcome that, but to excel. Because that's in our nature and our spirit. We've come through dark, difficult years of centuries of oppression and difficulty. But we've come this far, and I think we can overcome.
We will overcome, inshallah.
Absolutely.
Who should be reading this book? And you also talk on page 229 about starting a new life.
Yes.
So, number one, who should read the book and what's starting a new life all about? Is it for the country as a whole or for you, Hassan Ibrahim?
Well, who should read the book? I hope in particular the young who would be exposed to the story, because having lived in laudium for such a long time, we tend to learn and know of laudium and the Indian community for all the wrong reasons.
Too true.
And it's unfortunate.
Yes.
It's unfortunate that we talk about the insurance scams and all sorts of odd and problematic things, but we don't talk about the good things that the community has come out of the community. What came out of our community is not just myself, but a number of activists who put down their lives. Young women who went for training and contributed enormously to our struggle. And so this book is an attempt to tell part of that story so that we can be proud of our own communities rather than just look and mock at the terrible things that do take place. And I do believe that our community has done an enormous amount of good, and sometimes we need to just pay respect to that.
Absolutely. I've often heard people saying that South African Muslims have the deepest pockets and the biggest of hearts. Despite whatever challenges they face or whatever shenanigans they get up to, they're always in the forefront of giving. Starting a new life.
Well,
it's part of the book. And can I also ask another question added to that? Is whatever I've talked about this morning with you, is some of it or most of it contained in the book?
Yes. Yes, most of it is contained. All of it, in fact, is contained in the book. Starting a new life was really starting a new life at a personal level. When I got involved politically, it absorbed everything in my life. In 1985, 86, I got married and started a family.
Were you ever afraid about their safety because of your activism work?
Incredibly so, and it was rather in unfortunate circumstances because we lived in literally a war zone. And so I was all the time concerned about my wife and my children, and put an enormous pressure on us. So my political involvement came at the expense of my family. Both my parents, my sister, my brother, and my wife and children.
Sadly, there is a trade-off, isn't there?
Absolutely. It's a terrible trade-off. And so I was focused completely on my political responsibilities, neglected a lot of my family. And that cost me my first marriage. My children are now in the UK, it's where they've been for at least 10 years, 20 years. And I had to then start a new life.
Oh, so that's the starting a new life.
And so I'm very fortunate, alhamdulillah, I'm now married for 12 years and very grateful for that. At least for the first time, I've managed to experience what a normal family life can be like.
And may it continue for years to come. What would you have changed? Obviously, this is really your life story. Yes. It's your life contained in this book.
Yes.
If you had a chance to do it all over again, what would you have done differently and why?
I would fight harder.
Didn't you give up enough of your life?
It was a sacrifice. It was a sacrifice well worth, all the difficulties and the trauma and the tragedy that all came of it. The fact that we are where we are now is because there were activists like those that I pay tribute to in this book who produced the remarkable state that we are in. And in all of the blackouts and all of the problems that we experience, we lose sight of really the tremendous progress our country has made, and it has. I've traveled the world, worked in many Muslim countries, in fact, and I can still say to you as a Muslim, this is about the best country you can have.
Despite everything that we're faced with currently.
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. As Muslims, we should be proud of what we have, be pleased with it, and join in others in dealing and tackling and dealing with those challenges in life. And the challenges in our society are enormous, and we have a contribution to make. And I do believe we are able to deal with it.
With 2 minutes to wrap up time, do you believe that Muslims and Indians in particular, possibly even Khaleds, should be playing a bigger role as far as politics is concerned? And what would that role be?
I think they've played an enormous role so far, and their role will never be of a lesser nature. But I think in the future, I'm hoping that we would start playing a role as South Africans rather than considered from an Indian community or the colored community. But
I'm just thinking in terms of demographics. Yes. We just want to see more Muslims and other colors.
I think what we need to do is to play a more direct and be more front and center of activities, play a major role, and because we are capable of making that contribution in changing the future of this country to a positive one. I believe we have that ability. and we can do it, and that's what we should be doing.
Inshallah. Your closing comments to our viewers this morning about your book, about your life, and the interview in general.
I believe that our young people should think seriously about not only the challenges, and the challenges in our life, in our country, should not make us despondent, but in fact should spur us on to achieve greater heights. Because I do believe that when times are tough as now, I think our people have the ability to actually pull it out of the rut that it is in and make this an even greater country. I believe they have that ability, and that's the role that I believe they should be playing. Inshallah, that's what they would do.
Is this the entire story, or is there another book to come?
This is not the first book, and this won't be the last.
Inshallah.
There are different books that I've been involved in, and the next book is on constitution making as well. My first book was on constitution making. My next one will be on as well.
I look forward to that. Jazakallah for being with us in studio this morning, and we really and truly accolade you for your role in freeing this country, being an activist, a fearless activist at that, containing everything in this book from Marabastad to Mogadishu. It's been my pleasure to host you on the show this morning.
Thank you
Go
very
well.
much. Thank you very much. Much
Assalamu
appreciated.
alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
There you have it. Hassan Ibrahim, a son of our soil, obviously Marabastad. He played his role in freeing us as South Africans from the shackles of apartheid. Wonderful coming in touch with people like this, and that's where we leave it for today. Thank you indeed for your company, and as always, please take care on the roads. A big shout out to the production team. Until the next time, as always, it is Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Alli.